We are counting down 5 Piston singles, aircraft you can buy right now for under $200,000, that deliver real, measurable competitive performance against glass-cockpit aircraft selling north of $400,000. From a discontinued retractable that undercuts a Cirrus SR22 annual inspection by $3,000 a year, to a carbureted Lycoming-powered speedster that covers 42% more ground per gallon than the best-selling Piston single in the world, these airplanes operate completely outside the proprietary avionics ecosystem. The avionics industry does not want you to run these numbers. Which aircraft turns 10 gallons per hour into 157 knots, overhauls for $35,000, and costs less than a Cirrus down payment to acquire? Let us begin the countdown at number 5. The Piper Arrow has been on training ramps since 1967. It works. 200 horsepower. Lycoming O-360, constant speed propeller, retractable gear, and enough cabin width for 4 adults to sit without overlapping. For a pilot building complex endorsement time or stepping out of a fixed gear. Cherokee, the Arrow is the obvious next aircraft. The market has long treated it as a stepping stone to something more serious. That misread is costing buyers real money. A 1973 to 1976 Arrow II in solid condition trades between $85,000 to $150,000 in 2026. The Cirrus SR22 with fixed landing gear and a fixed pitch composite prop starts at $350,000 for a used G3 example with comparable airframe hours. New, the G7 opens at $850,000. The Arrow cruises at 130 to 143 knots. The SR22 gets to the destination faster, but the Continental IO-550-N in the SR22 overhauls for $80,000 to $90,000. The Arrow's Lycoming IO-360 C1C overhauls for $30,000 to $35,000 at any qualified independent shop. It has the same 2,000-hour TBO. The overhaul gap is $50,000 every engine cycle. Fly 3 cycles and the engine cost differential has paid for a second Arrow. I have watched pilots walk away from perfectly airworthy Arrows because the Cirrus parked next to it looks more professional on the ramp. They never ran the maintenance math. The Arrow is not the flashiest aircraft at the fuel pump. It is the one that keeps $50,000 in your account every 2,000 hours. Coming in at number 4 is the aircraft Cessna called the airplane of the 70s, which they then abandoned. It features a strutless cantilever wing, wide clamshell cabin doors, and a 200 horsepower fuel-injected Lycoming IO-360 mounted to one of the cleanest low-drag airframes Cessna ever produced. Production of the Cardinal RG ran from 1970 to 1978. Cessna built 1,543 of them and closed the line. The used market has largely ignored them ever since, which is precisely why they appear on this list. A well-maintained 1975 to 1978 Cardinal RG with a serviceable engine trades between $130,000 and $165,000 today. That is 40% below a used Cirrus SR22 G3 in comparable condition. Cruise settles between 144 and 150 knots on 10.5 gallons per hour. The cabin is 48 inches wide, broader than a Skyhawk, broader than a Piper Archer, and the only Cessna high-wing single ever built with a cantilever wing and retractable gear combined. Annual inspection on a clean Cardinal RG costs $1,500 to $2,100 for the inspection itself. The Cirrus annual inspection rarely leaves a factory-authorized shop for under $5,000. Add the mandatory CAPS parachute repack on its 10-year cycle, the composite-specific labor rates that most independent shops cannot handle, and the Garmin Perspective avionics stack that only Cirrus factory-certified dealers are permitted to service. The annual cost gap widens with every calendar year the aircraft ages. A failed radio on the Cardinal goes to any avionics shop in the country. A failed perspective display on the SR22 goes to a Cirrus service center, or it waits until one is available. The Cardinal's Lycoming runs without asking permission from a single corporate entity. Number 3 is the aircraft that looks like Grumman built it for a carrier deck, because Grumman did build carrier aircraft, and the construction philosophy crossed over directly. Flush riveted bonded aluminum skin borrowed from the company's naval aviation division. A sliding canopy designed to stay open in flight up to 130 miles per hour, a clean low wing profile, and a 180 horsepower carbureted Lycoming O-360 4K spinning a fixed-pitch Macaulay prop. This is a fixed-gear, fixed-pitch aircraft with no retraction motor drawing current and no constant speed governor in the annual parts list. The conventional wisdom says this combination loses any cruise comparison against a complex retractable in the same power class. Aviation consumer editors flew a Tiger side by side with a Piper Arrow, which had 200 horsepower, a constant speed propeller, and retractable gear on a direct cruise comparison leg. The Tiger pulled ahead. The Arrow ran at full throttle. The Tiger was at 60% power. Cruise lands at 139 knots on 9.8 gallons per hour, delivering more nautical miles per gallon than the Arrow at the same altitude on 20 fewer horsepower, with no gear motor drawing current and no constant speed governor in the overhaul parts list. The carbureted O-360A4K has a 2,000-hour time between overhauls. There is no fuel injection system to service between overhauls, no throttle body to inspect, and no diagnostic software required to read the engine's condition. An experienced A&P mechanic with a set of compression gauges tells you everything you need to know about this engine on the annual ramp. No laptop required, no dealer account, no software license to diagnose whether the cylinders are healthy. Picture the annual on a Tiger. The owner removes the cowling, assists the inspector, changes the oil, services the plugs, logs the work, and signs the return to service entry with their own private pilot certificate number. That entire process is legal, documented, and fully compliant with federal maintenance regulation. Picture the Cirrus SR22 annual. The shop runs the avionics diagnostic suite. The composite airframe inspection requires access to manufacturer-specific repair data, and if the perspective display flags an error code, the authorization chain runs through Grumman before a squawk is signed off. The labor rate differential between an independent piston shop and a factory-certified composite avionics center reflects exactly that difference in complexity. Under FAR. Part 43. Appendix A, the registered owner of this airplane, holding nothing more than a private pilot certificate, can change the oil, service the spark plugs, replace the brake pads, swap a battery, and sign the aircraft back into service with their own certificate number in the logbook. That is federal law giving the owner direct authority over their own aircraft. Clean flying Tigers with mid-time engines trade between $115,000 and $145,000 in 2026. A Cirrus SR22 G4 with comparable airframe time opens at $400,000. The market has dismissed this airplane for 40 years. The mechanic who reads the logbook knows exactly what it is. Number 2 is where the fuel economy argument becomes impossible to dispute. Mooney built the M20C Mark 21 from 1962 to 1978, and 1,680 are still registered in the FAA database. That number matters because it means parts availability is not a concern, type experience shops exist in every region, and the owner community has documented and solved every squawk this airframe produces. A carbureted 180 horsepower Lycoming O-360A1D drives a laminar flow wing that Mooney designed in an era when aerodynamic efficiency was the only engineering lever available for performance gains. The carbureted engine is not a compromise. A carbureted Lycoming carries fewer components in the fuel delivery system than any fuel-injected variant. No injector nozzles to clean, no fuel injection servo to overhaul, and no flow divider to inspect on condition. The diagnostic complexity of a carbureted engine at the annual ramp is lower at every step. The result was an airframe that outruns its own horsepower. Book cruise is 147 knots. Owners with the standard speed modifications installed report from 155 to 158 knots at altitude. Now run the numbers against the competition. The M20C burns 10 gallons per hour at cruise. That is 15.5 nautical miles per gallon. The Cirrus SR22 at 172 knots burns 15.7 gallons per hour. That is 10.9 nautical miles per gallon. The Mooney is 10% slower and covers 42% more ground per gallon. On a 400 nautical mile leg, the M20C burns 26 gallons and the SR22 burns 37. At $6 per gallon, the Mooney saves $66 on that single leg. Across 100 hours annually, the fuel savings compound before the hangar bill, the insurance differential, or the engine reserve account is touched. Then add the overhaul number, $35,000 for the Lycoming versus $80,000 to $90,000 for the SR22's Continental IO-550-N at the same 2,000-hour TBO interval. The gap at every overhaul cycle is $50,000. Good M20C airframes with serviceable engines trade between $65,000 and $95,000. Less to buy, less to fuel, less to overhaul, and no dependency on a factory service network anywhere in the ownership chain. The market ignores the M20C because there is no touchscreen in the panel. That is the market's problem. Number 1 takes everything the M20C established and raises the ceiling. The M20E Super 21 installs 200 horsepower, fuel-injected Lycoming IO-360 A1A into the same laminar flow airframe, the same efficient wing, the same forward-rake tail that makes every Mooney identifiable from a mile out on final approach. Cruise lands between 155 and 163 knots on approximately 10 gallons per hour. Typical used prices run between $75,000 and $105,000 for a flying example in serviceable condition. That is the entry price of the used Cirrus SR22 G2 market, before airframe hours are accounted for, before the age of the prospective avionics stack is factored in, and before the first service center estimate arrives after purchase. Now consider what ownership of the M20E does not require. In July 2025, Grumman announced the Perspective Plus upgrade path for Cirrus G3 and G5 aircraft. The announcement specified that installation runs exclusively through Grumman-authorized dealers and Cirrus factory service centers. No independent shop qualifies. The M20E owner received no such announcement because the M20E has no proprietary integrated flight deck that requires a corporate upgrade cycle to remain airworthy. The Lycoming IO-360 overhaul costs $35,000 at any Lycoming authorized facility in the country. Federal regulation reinforces the ownership position directly. Under FAR Part 43. Appendix A, any private pilot who is the registered owner of this aircraft can perform 31 categories of preventive maintenance. Oil changes, spark plug service, tire and brake work, battery replacement. Those owners can approve the aircraft for return to service with their own signature. That right does not exist in the integrated glass cockpit world, where avionics airworthiness increasingly runs through a manufacturer's service portal rather than a pilot's logbook entry. The Cirrus ecosystem has spent 20 years building mandatory upgrade cycles, parachute repack requirements, and factory certification layers into SR22 ownership that progressively remove the owner from direct control of their own aircraft at every service interval. The M20E operates on a different premise. 160 knots, 10 gallons per hour, a $35,000 overhaul at the shop that does the best work, and a maintenance structure where the owner's private pilot certificate still carries legal authority over their own aircraft. That is the complete picture, and it is why the M20E sits at the top of this list. Across all 5 of these aircraft, the same truth surfaces. The avionics industry and the original equipment manufacturer pricing structure have built a service dependency chain around modern general aviation aircraft, a chain that is invisible at the point of purchase and that reveals itself at every maintenance interval that follows. These 5 airplanes predate that chain entirely. The engine answers to the mechanic and to the Federal Maintenance Code, not to a manufacturer's service portal. In aviation, the aircraft that costs the most to buy is not always the most expensive to own across a decade of actual flying. These 5 prove the math, and they are doing it on ramps across the country right now. Which one fits your mission? Drop your budget and your mission profile in the comments, and I will tell you exactly which one takes it.